Don't be old and gray. Come out and vote today. As a millennial, I think it's super important for us to get out there and vote. You think you might not have a voice because it's just all these like older people in office, the older people vote, but your voice does matter. It's your civic duty as a young adult to get there, get out to the polls, get out and vote, get out there and educate yourself because your voice can be heard with all the proper education. Like, it's so important for millennials to vote. It's so, so, so important because your voice can be heard. Pick the right candidate for you. Pick the right person who will make your voice be heard and help make a difference in tomorrow, today's, and yesterday's society.
Young voters notoriously neglect the importance of voting, but their voice is an important one on both sides of the aisle. Key issues in every election increasingly relate to the concerns of students and professionals between ages 18 to 29, making it essential for members within that age group to educate themselves on political issues and take to the poll. While millennials represented nearly 50% of the entire voter population in the 2016 election, they were further divided along race, gender, and education lines when considering key issues from both candidates. The youth vote has the potential to be extremely influential in this country. While young voter participation in 2016 declined by 2% from a record 52% at the 2008 election, today the voting population includes almost equal parts millennials and baby boomers. As the boomer electorate decreases in size, experts suggest it is merely a matter of time before millennials become the largest and most powerful group driving future elections in the U.S. Unfortunately, not all who can vote will, meaning that fewer young people get to directly influence issues that might affect their lives for years to come, including college tuition reform and federal job programs.
Yes, so as Caitlin just mentioned, we see that while millennials, people our age, ages 18 to 29, are a higher portion of the population, they're actually the lowest represented portion of voters. So an example, in 2016 for the presidential election, only 19% of people aged 18 to 29 who were registered voters actually went out and voted in that presidential election. Whereas you see an older demographic, which is actually a shrinking demographic, the 45 to 64-year-old voters, or the baby boomer generation, actually is the highest represented people who are actually voting and are registered to vote at 49%. So there's a 30% difference between millennials and baby boomers who are going out and actually voting. And this is really important because most of these studies have shown that if more people who are millennial aged actually went out and voted, it would have had a huge difference on who would have won the presidential election. Perhaps not actually changing the candidate who won, but really making a difference and making it a closer race. And so that is really a big important thing that we're preaching here, is that, you know, millennials should go out and vote, because even though they're the largest demographic of people, they're actually the lowest represented in voting. And so people, as we said, it's a big missed opportunity for us age people to go out and make sure that we're voting, because people who are older and are in a shrinking demographic are actually beating us out and having a bigger influence and having their hand in the election. And it's very important for us to go out and vote.
Diversity. Another thing you always want to keep in mind being a young voter is that you are a part of an incredibly diverse group. The divisive nature of partisan politics is alive and well among young voters in today's world. So much so that the millennial electorate is expected to be the first demographic group with the ability to challenge the basic two-party system, potentially driving a need for alternative political parties whom millennials feel can represent the needs of a diverse population through a more inclusive agenda. The same young adults in 2016 who are more likely to identify as liberals were also less likely to identify as Democrats. Currently, millennials are the most diverse voting group. Also of note, at 35%, a higher percentage of young voters identify with independent political views rather than Republican or Democrat than in the past 3 presidential elections.
So like we've all mentioned, one of the biggest problems right now is just not going out and voting, whether that be young or old people. And one of those problems is because they don't feel educated enough to make that decision. They don't know if this side is going to benefit them or the other, and they just choose not to vote, plain and simple. But we live in a society now that lives off of Twitter, lives off of Facebook, lives off of Instagram. We get all these notifications to our phone constantly, and there's no reason for us to not be educated on this issue. You're voting for your politicians, and these are the people that are going to have your voice be heard. So you need to know what their stance is and what they support and what you support. Currently, our president, Donald Trump, he has 24.5 million followers on Twitter. I don't follow him. Honestly, some of us might not follow him here, but if you go on Twitter, you will most likely see his tweet after a little while. He'll retweet his own tweets, which bumps that tweet already out again. It's like a second wave to more Twitter followers. Someone will like it, say you follow him. Maybe it's like a meme account. So they like his tweet. It now pops up on your feed. So you're seeing Donald Trump's views. So you might not agree with that, right? Well, we have all of this social media that there's no reason that an opposing candidate or someone else, you can't learn what they like. We mentioned it at the beginning. Beto O'Rourke, he was running out of Texas against Ted Cruz recently. He's actually been criticized, saying he needs to be careful with his social media presence, his new social media presence, because he is blown up on Twitter. If you see any tweets about him on Twitter, it has around like 300,000 plus likes, and it'll just be him speaking out to a crowd of people. Social media has just given us such a huge platform that stuff spreads like wildfire now, and you need to be careful and diligent and know what you care about to be educated, an educated voter. So you need to learn what sides represent what you care about, and we have all of these resources, and there's no reason for you to not be educated on what you value and what you want to support.
As stated before, your vote does matter. And the youth vote is the most powerful vote in the elections. In 2012, millennials were credited with the Barack Obama win. And saying that, the statistic was that 67% of his votes came from the youth vote. They came from millennials. That's people 18 to 30 years old now. That's people our age. We might have not been able to vote in that election, but we were able to vote 4 years after. And that says something that some of the biggest elections have been swayed because of our vote. And like going back to Beto O'Rourke, his goal was to campaign in every single county in Texas, but he was smart about it. He campaigned in college campuses, in college towns. He went out to the youth because the youth is so large. As these baby boomers and even like the generation before that, like the Great Depression generation, start to age out and stop voting. Like my great grandmother doesn't vote anymore, and she's 90 from the Great Depression, and they still bust people out, but now they're campaigning towards us. You can't not go on Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter without seeing it. Like just watching stories, you'll see that Go Vote app. You get people at our age saying go vote, go out to the polls. And it's such a powerful thing to realize that most of us are 21 here. Our first time voting was during the most recent presidential campaign, and Trump won. And like that's so mind-blowing that it was that was our first time voting was during a major presidential election. And this is so like present right now because we just went through midterm elections, and it's so important to like educate yourself because your voice does matter and your voice can be heard. It's just your job to get educated and figure out your candidate who has the same values you do to be able to do that. And then in 2016, candidates campaigned hard. That was like our presidential election from the 18 to 29. They hit up us because we make up such a big part of the population. Like we're the working class. We're like fresh out of college. We're the most impressionable, but we're also the most like who care about our opinions. We're so like open about them. Like we don't hide them. Like, and it's like very smart for them to target millennials because we are such a powerful like electoral group and everything. And I think it's just super important because it's like people say like their voice can't be heard, yet we're the most powerful ones, to do it. And it's just like, you just have to understand the necessity of winning approval is to winning the vote majority. And we are now the majority. We are the ones who make the vote. We are the ones who make money. We are the ones who donate to these campaigns, like, within the next 10 years. Like, so it's our job to realize the youth vote is the most powerful vote. And we're going through this during the huge social media blast. And it's important. Like, I think in 2012, Obama was the first president, and also to campaign using big data. And big data reflects back to, like, what we do, what we repost, what we say on our social media platforms, what websites we visit. And from there, it's filtered and it's singled out, and it goes through people's APIs. And, like, that's why sometimes we may see more Trump stuff, more like Republican stuff, if, like, we've been citing more Republicans versus, or, like, let's say, like, we're more Democrat side with Hillary and Bernie and, like, Beto O'Rourke. Like, those are just some examples. But, like, even then, like, social media is filtering out what we want to see, but it's also our job to be educated on all platforms. And that's why the youth vote is so powerful, because we choose to look at both. We just don't hear one thing and go, oh, that sounds okay, you know? So, what are y'all's personal experiences with voting?
My first time I could vote was during the presidential election in 2016. I actually did not vote for that, just because I was, so busy, and I was ignorant in thinking, my vote doesn't count, which a lot of people think. But then this past midterm election, I made sure to go and vote, and I, thought it would be this hard, long process. And it honestly was just like, I always thought it's just another thing on my schedule that I don't need to do. So I just thought, I'll just skip out on it. But this time I did it, and it was so easy. I thought the line was going to be so long. It took me like 20 minutes, and I felt so accomplished and proud of myself. And I went with some of my friends. I made it like a fun gathering for all of us. So I feel like if you just go and do it, like, you'll be happy about it and proud. So just go vote.
Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to mention was, Lexie, you had mentioned earlier how in the Obama election he won. He had 67% voter representation in that 18 to 29 demographic, whereas for the Hillary and Trump election it was only 19%. So it really does make a big difference in that the Democratic Party, I'm sure they would have liked to have had that extra 50% of votes in order to help their cause. And so that's why it's so important, is that it really can, determine an election. And so I thought that was really interesting that you mentioned the large difference in voter turnout and how it really changed the party who won the race.
And then it's, as you can tell, like, some presidents or, like, even campaigners, they forget about the millennial, because they're like, oh, they don't vote. But it's like, we are getting to that age where we're sitting here thinking, like, is this where I want my taxes to be going? Is this where my values are? Like, I don't feel like this candidate represents me. Like, all these laws and decisions are being made that are going to dictate our lives, and even our working lives and personal lives. And, like, we're starting to come to that realization at that young age that we are the ones to make a difference. We are the ones who are going to change the world and change their mindsets. We have to just make our voice be heard, because it's not just that baby boomer or, like, even our parents' generation again, the lock-key generation anymore. It's us. We're the next ones. So, what about you, CJ? What was your past experience with voting?
Oh, my past experience was very similar to Caitlin's. I didn't vote in the last presidential election because I felt like at the time, ignorantly, I thought my vote didn't matter, but then I learned that every vote counts. It's the people like me who think that your vote doesn't matter, and we actually could have been the vote that helped sway the election in our favor. So that's how I personally feel. That's why I made it my due diligence to vote in the past midterm elections, and I felt very accomplished as well. I even got my sticker, and I was waving around everywhere. So that's my take on it. So if you're young, go vote. Go vote.
What about
It's
you?
your right.
What was your experience with voting?
So I didn't vote either in the 2016 presidential election. I just, at the time, I was, 19 years old, just got to college. It's not one of those things that's like really a priority. It's more like a topic of conversation rather than this is going to affect your life. But we're all 21 plus years older, and now we're looking for jobs, like, straight up. Like, we're starting to care about our careers. And the more that becomes important to you, you realize that these political decisions, they affect your life and the people around you. So you just gotta be educated and know what you care for and try to make the best decision possible.
That sounds good. I know personally, I voted during the presidential campaign. I did a mail-in vote. I did my civic duty. I was kind of sad I didn't get a sticker, and you had to do it like super in advance, and like that was okay. But then I slacked on my part during our midterm elections. I ended up being home around those times, and I didn't go vote because, it wasn't during the polling days that I happened to be there. But I still could have dropped off my mail-in ballot. So that's my fault for not doing that. And then it did kind of make a difference because I am from Texas, and I did see that Beto O'Rourke only lost by less than 200,000 votes, which is such a small margin when you think about it. If our generation just got out and voted more, that could have been a difference. We could have been blue for the first time in 20 plus years. That's kind of crazy in my opinion. So, What about you, Sean? You haven't said what your experience with voting was.
I voted in every election possible. I actually really enjoy doing it. I like going in. I like feeling like I've accomplished something and feeling like I've made a difference in my community. And so I try and do as much research as possible. I voted in the 2016 presidential election. I voted in the midterms. And so I think it's just something that's really important that we should all do. And it really can make a difference because in one of my local elections, it actually came down to 200 votes. And so I thought that was really interesting that if I had not voted, it really could have been different.
So don't wait till you're old and gray. Come out and vote today.